So if you've been following along and you have generated your app into the htdocs ye directory, then you should see this. You should see the directory structure inside your projects in NetBeans if you've been following along and you set up the project. And what we have is we have a few files. First, we have the assets folder or directory, and that holds resources for modules like JavaScript files, CSS files, things like that. And then we have the main CSS folder, which holds all our main style sheets, and the images folder, which obviously holds images. And then the protected directory, and that's where pretty much everything is. That's where our entire MVC structure is, our config files, database migrations. You can see we have our controllers folder, which has a default site controller. Our models is where any database interaction will be. And then we have our views folder, which displays the layouts and whatever view that we want to display. So if we open up the site controller, now a controller has to have whatever you want to call it. In this case, it's site, and then the word controller, and it should extend the base controller class. And then in the controller we have different methods or functions, and you can see we have action index, action error, action contact. So we need to use this action keyword on all of our action controllers. And if we take a look at this one, if we don't specify a controller or an action, then this action index is going to run, and all this does is displays the index view. So you can see this render, and then we're going to put the view name. Now how does it know to get this index, this view? Well, if you look at the name of the controller, it's site controller, and then if we go into views, and you see we have a site folder. Alright, so in that site folder we have an index file. That's where that's coming from. Alright, so if we open up that index file, it actually has the code and the content of the home page, which is right here. Now Ye comes with a really nice tool called Gi that's used to generate your whole MVC. You can generate controllers, views, and models, but you can also create them manually. So let's just do real quick. Let's create it. Let's actually just copy that action index and paste it down here, and let's call this action staff. And this is just going to be, it's just going to load the staff view. So if I save that, and we want to go to our site view and create a new PHP file called staff.php. And in that file, we're not going to have any dynamic content. We'll just have an h1 tag. And we'll put an unordered list. And you can see with NetBeans we have really nice code completion. I just typed the first tag and it pops in the second, so that's really nice. Staff, we'll say Julie Smith. Bob White. Say, I don't know, Harry Jackson. Alright, so there's our staff, so I'm going to save that. Now to get to the controller that we want and the action, see if I click on, actually contact is a better example. If I click on contact, you can see we have this site/contact. And these URLs aren't very pretty, but there is a way that we can make them better looking for search engines and stuff. But by default we have the controller site and the action contact. So if we go and we look in our site controller, we have action contact, and that's where that content's coming from. If we change this to site/staff, we get our staff page, it's loading the action staff method, which is calling the staff view. So that's where this data is coming from. And ultimately, we want to pull data from a database. We don't want to just type it in the view, because what would the point of using a framework or even PHP if we're just going to deal with static content? So now I want to show you how we can generate controllers, views, and models through GUI. So the first thing we need to do is enable it. So we want to go into our config folder and then to main.php. Now in this file there's things like our base path, our database configuration, and our modules, and by default, since we generated our app from the command line, the GUI module is already here, it's just commented out. So what we need to do is uncomment this GUI array out. So that's the first comment, and then that. So now is now uncommented. So what we want to do now is we want to choose a password, and I'll just say password, and that's going to be so we can log in through the front end and use the GUI module. So we want to save this. So we can now go to the front end and we want to change this up. We want, instead of site index, we want GUI slash default slash login. And then we have this page where we need to enter our password that we just created. And then we get this interface. So what I want to do is generate a controller. And I'm going to generate a controller for our staff. So controller ID, I'm just going to call staff. And we have this little tooltip here which shows us some of the naming conventions. If we type in post, it's going to generate post controller with a capital P and a capital C. So in this case, we're going to generate a staff controller. And if we click on this preview, it's going to show us all the files that are going to be created. So controllers slash staff controller, and we're also going to get a views slash staff slash index.php. So that'll be the view. So let's go ahead and click on generate. And it says the controller has been generated successfully. You may try it now. So if we click on that, it then takes us to the staff controller. And if we look in our file structure, in our controllers folder, we have a staff controller, which we can open up. And again, we have a default of action index. So this is just rendering the index page, just like with the site controller. And if we go down to views and staff, you can see it's generated the staff folder and the index file or view, and it's just basically has an H1 tag, and we're echoing out this ID, which is staff, and then this action ID which is index. And what I'm going to do is actually get the content from the site controller staff view with the list of names. I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste that into the staff index view. And let's see, we'll keep a H1 tag. Actually, we'll get rid of that. And this is just for the breadcrumb. We'll keep that. So save that, and I'm going to delete the staff.php from the site controller view. And I'm going to go to my site controller and get rid of that action staff, because now we have an entire controller dedicated to that, to staff. Now I do want to go a step further, and instead of just pasting this info in the view, I want it coming from the controller into the view, because that's ultimately what's going to happen. Is the controller is going to get data from the model when we implement the model in database, and then it's going to hand it off to the view. So right now we're just going to do the handing off to the view part. Right, so what we need to do here is, along with this view, the index view, we're going to put in another parameter, and this parameter is going to be an array, and this is going to be an array of values. So let's see, I even want the heading to, actually no, we can leave the heading. We'll just get these users. So I'll copy Julie Smith, and this is going to be an associative array. We've learned about this in past chapters. And let's actually make some properties. We'll make these three users class properties, and normally we wouldn't do this, but it's just to show you that we could. So we'll say public staff 1. Alright, so we'll go all the way to 3. 2, 3. Alright, so now what we want to do is pass these variables to the view. So we'll have array 1, we'll make a variable, we'll still call it the same, staff 1, and this is an associative array, so that's the key or the variable, and then the value is going to be this staff 1. And remember, this is used in a class when you're talking about the class properties, so this staff 1. So to access that, we need to use this. So there's 1. Let's actually separate this a little. So we want a comma, and then we'll say staff 2, and that's going to be this staff 2, staff 3, this staff 3. Alright, looks good. So let's save this, and now we want to go here and we want to replace the static text with PHP echo staff 1. Right. So staff 1, staff 2, staff 3. Alright, let's save that and reload, and we get those staff member names. And you can tell it's coming from the controller. Let's change Julie Smith to Julie Williams. We save that. Now Julie Williams. So, I mean, this isn't something that you would actually put into production, but it's just showing you how you can pass variables or content to the view from the controller. Ultimately, we want to get these values from a database, and that's what we'll be looking at next.